something that you want the Android operating system to do, whether it be another activity or bringing up a camera, you use an intent. Basically, you declare an intent, you give it this is Java for itself, and you're giving it the class that you want to invoke. If it's a system, then the syntax would be a little bit different. If it's a system activity. Then what we do is we do a start activity. This syntax right here, start activity, says, go ahead and start it. You don't know if the activity is finished or not. Your main activity goes away and a new one comes up. When you hit the back button, Android takes care of actually going back. Now you don't know when the activity finished when you say start activity. If you need to know, you do start activity for result. How does that work? I still pass it the intent class, the detail, but now I give it a code. In this case, it's 1,000. Okay? When that event, when that activity finishes, my main activity that left will get a notification in the on activity result. The request code is going to be 1,000. The result code is going to be more than likely ID OK or ID cancel. So that the user hit OK, did he hit cancel, or do you want to pass back some other value? The data that's going to be passed back can be any data that you want to pass back in your detail class. So you can pass data back to the main class. Let's look at an example of that. In this example, we have the activity class, activity main. We can jump to it, and here we have a button. And the buttons take a picture. Okay? What I'm doing here, as we saw before, is I'm finding the view by ID. So I'm getting a handle on that button so I can do something with it. I'm testing to make sure that that button actually find that button. Because sometimes actually, you may not actually find that button. You may not find it for a couple of reasons why. Let's say you have one layout for portrait and another layout for landscape. And that button is not visible in portrait. So you won't have a button. You won't have a reference to it. And that's how you can test it in different layouts. Okay? In this case, I'm going to show you how I actually code it. I'm taking that button, take picture. Now it's giving me all the methods that I can work with, invoke. One of those methods is called set Onclicklistener. You can see a lot of other activities in here that you can listen for. These are all events that get passed back to you if you want to know when they happen. So in this case, I'm saying set Onclicklistener. So when the user actually hits the button, my listener will be invoked. I type in new. This is very similar to like Visual Studio and a lot of other IDEs. It's giving me a list of different methods or different functions that I can respond to. This one is the Onclicklistener Event. And basically, this code right here says, in my Onclicklistener, if I get an on-click, this method is going to be invoked. That's how I know he hit this button. Okay? If I had another button, I would do the same thing. You can also, if you like, I don't personally like doing this, but you can extend your class so that all your button messages come to your class. So you get one click event, And then inside that click event, you have to look at the ID to see which button it is. I prefer this way, but people like to do it the other way also. One event handler that handles all your buttons, and then you just have to decide which button it is. It's very similar to this guy. So in this function, on options item, that's when a menu is selected. And any one of those menu items can be selected. And what we're doing down here is we're saying, get me the ID of the menu item that was selected. And then if it's an action settings, then this is what I want to do. So that's how you can look at your different buttons from a global standpoint. I prefer the anonymous method of doing the set on click listing.
Is there any sort of performance issue if you do the one way versus the other, or are they both about the same performance?
I haven't noticed them. I think it's a preference on how people like to do things.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen one because I work with people who like doing it the other way.
Right.
And I haven't seen one.
No, I was just wondering if there was any sort of measurement or test that suggested that one way was better than the other way. This is during certain conditions that maybe one way could actually be better than the other way, and as guidelines or as just some sort of. Because from what you're saying, it just seems like both ways are about the same. It's just about preference. There's no reason why we have two different methods.
Yeah, I haven't seen any, and I know people who actually don't like the way I do it.
Okay.
Right? When you're working on a project, you have people who do it different ways, and I haven't seen this. From what I've seen, it's a preference.
All right.
Okay. So go ahead.
You were mentioning about the layouts. If the layout is changed from portrait to landscape, will Android manage by itself, or do we need to write two separate views and internally manage it?
Okay, so there's two parts to that. As far as portrait and landscape, if Android detects as a landscape, what he would do is there's only one layout here, layout, okay? If I wanted another layout, what I would do is create a layout. Let me do it this way. So now I'm telling Android Studio to create a landscape variation of this layout. Okay? And as you can see over here, he created a layout directory with the suffix of land. Okay? In this directory, as you can see, there's another test layout. This layout is landscape. The other layout is portrait. Android knows when he's in landscape mode, he's going to look for this directory, layout that land. He's going to see if that layout is in this directory, and if it is, he's going to upload that directory, upload that one. We don't need to do anything else other than that. Okay. In our activity, we will still call Android main, or in this case test. Behind the scenes, he will load one or the other. Okay? And again, the layouts could be completely different. You can have a portrait layout that's completely different than the landscape layout. It's up to you. Usually they're not too different. They're just different based on the fact that it's landscape, and you can show more controls.
Do we need to explicitly pass the data or something, or will it manage by itself?
Say that again?
So,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
just wanted to know if there is a data that's displayed, and should I explicitly pass the data?
The data that you're showing in the
Yeah.
screen? So what happens when you change the layout? When you change the layout from portrait to landscape, Android actually destroys the layout and recreates it. So you get another OnCreate. You don't necessarily know per se if you're in landscape or portrait. All you know is you get an OnCreate. And basically everything that you did to initialize your application, you may have to do it again. Or you may have to detect that he's just changing the attribute and just let me update the data. You don't necessarily need to make connections again. Okay. So you get a whole new OnCreate. You're in landscape mode. And for all practical purposes, it's the same. The layout is changed. Now this is different than iOS. iOS, if it changes, you got to do a little bit more coding to detect the changes and a little different calculations. Android, you really don't know if it is. Because some people, with some tablets, they have it locked in landscape. You know, other people have it locked in portrait. You just have to account for that. This is how you start an intent with a camera. So what we do is, we define an intent, in this case it's called camera. We're defining a new intent, renewing it, and we're passing it a string, Android Media Action Image Capture. That's like a system-defined URI. And basically we're telling the system that we're calling a system intent to bring up the camera. If you want to give the camera a different directory, you would pass data into that intent. So you say camera, the name of the intent, put extra, we're putting extra values inside this intent so that when the intent sees these values, he knows this is the name of the file. And basically we're saying this file URI that I'm passing is the name of the picture. So you take the picture and you want to give the name. If you don't pass the file name, he's going to let you know you finished, but he's going to give you back a string of bytes, a bitmap, and then you have to save it the way you want and do all that kind of things that you want. Again, if you want to know if the camera intent has finished, start activity for results. You call it intent, you give it a value. When you get that value back, you know that the camera intent has finished. If you want to bring up the dialer to make a phone call, you pass it another intent with the phone number, and basically it's the same thing. Again, remember, whenever you do any of these system activities, taking a picture, a camera, any type of system intent, you always have to have permission. And that's specified in your Android manifest. In the new versions of Android, Android 6, they now changed it so that the permissions is not necessarily in the Android manifest file. You actually have to ask for permission at one time. I don't necessarily like it, but that's what they're doing. So the syntax is a little bit different. The other thing to keep in mind, if you see this line, and I know it's kind of difficult, but basically, not all Android handsets will have a camera. Most will, but not all will. So if you call the intent and that particular device doesn't have that system activity, if you don't make a check, it'll crash. So for example, I have an Android camera. It's not a phone, it's a camera. And if I call it a dialing, it'll fail because it doesn't have a phone. So you actually have to check to make sure that the system intent actually exists before you call it. Otherwise, it's going to crash. And these are the permissions. These permissions will go into your Android manifest. These are some very common ones. And some of them now are they're not needed anymore. Android permission internet. What that says is my application actually needs permission to go to the internet. If you don't have this in your Android manifest, you can't do it. And then when you're debugging and you try and make an internet call, what'll happen is you'll see it's denied. Same thing for camera, access network state. So what that permission is saying is maybe you want to check to see if you are connected to the internet. And this is the permission that you would ask for to check to see if you can ascertain if he's connected to the internet and what kind of connection he has to the internet. Wi-Fi, 4G, internet, all that information. And then the last two relates to GPS. So these are the two permissions that you give to your application to ask the user to get GPS. And these are the same permissions you see when you download an application and it says this app needs these permissions. He's reading the manifest file. And that's how he knows, that's how you know what permissions he's asking for. Again, it changes for Android 6. I don't know if you actually have to put them inside the manifest file, but now you have to check at one time if you can have the permission. And the user can actually say, no, I don't want you to have access to my GPS. And then your code has to act accordingly. Yes?
Do you need to copy these XML tags directly into the manifest, or does Studio give you a convenient list of all the different permissions that you have?
They give you an IntelliSense on how to type it. So as you're typing them out, you'll get a list of all the different permissions, just like the...
Is there like a UI?
Sorry?
Is there like a UI for Studio to do that? Or?
Yeah, it's just let me see if I can do it real quick. And then these are all the permissions that you can enumerate. And then you just pick whichever one you want. And then that's how you specify what permissions you're asking for in your manifest. Okay? We talked about events, how to respond to events. Just about every view, every control has events that you can listen for. Whether it be a button, edit box, a slider, any type of control. Whenever the user interacts with them, you can be notified and you can respond to it. Some of the most typical ones are on click, on long click when he's holding it down for a long time, and on touch. On touch is kind of a funny one. It basically means he's touching it but hasn't released it yet. I'm thinking on iOS is touch up and touch down or something like that. But on click means that he clicked it and he let go. You can determine if he's just touching it. And then we have listeners, which we talked about. Each event can have its own event listeners that he would like, that you would like. You can have as many listeners as you want. And sometimes you have to. So for example, a list box, right? You may have an on click, on double click. You may have an on scroll when the user is scrolling up, scrolling down. That one usually has the most type of events. Yes?
Does the more events you have in your program increase the power usage?
No, but depending on what you're doing in all those events, you could increase the power. So let's say all your events basically do nothing, right? Then it's just function calls going back and forth. But let's say your events is doing something like GPS or talk to a Bluetooth device or doing something, that's going to take your power. Not so much the events. Because the events are pretty much just pointers. It's going to be called. Okay? Here's an example we talked about the Animus. This way is called an Animus event. It doesn't have a name. It's just defined and it's declared and is in code. This one, as you can see, I have an activity. It implements the Onclicklistener. So I'm saying that this event now has a method, as you can see down below, onClick. It's not in the Animus function, it's an onClick. And so now, as you can see, I still do my button find view by ID. But then what I say is my Onclicklistener is this activity, instead of a pointer to another function that's new. And now when this function gets called, he's going to call this activity, and he's going to call it onClick. If you have more than two, which we talked about, this is how you determine which one was clicked, button 1 or button 2. Yes?
Do we need to unsubscribe to the listeners?
That's a good question.
They just disappear when you unload
Yeah, because I know in C# you can unsubscribe to
them. You
it.
should unsubscribe, yes.
Right.
Even when it's anonymous.
In Java, you can unsubscribe to it.
You can unsubscribe, yes. And I've never unsubscribed.
You should put in some like debug statements and see if it's piling them up every time.
Yes. The only thing I would hope is that the garbage collection would do it. So
Yeah.
when that whole thing goes out of scope, he realizes that
Yeah.
this pointer is
That
no
would,
good.
yeah, that would be typical, but if you had a user sitting there taking 10 pictures, that's when the page is in scope.
Yeah. Yeah. And is that the way it's done in VC and .NET?
It's the way it is in Java as well.
It's Java?
Yeah, C# as well. Most programming languages.
Because see, what happens is like in this program, okay, when I click this guy, he's going to another event. That activity that had that button is no longer in view, so you can't click,
Mm-hmm.
okay? But that's just because how it's implemented.
Yeah, no.
Let's say this guy started a background thread that called the, then yeah, it would run into the problem we would have. Yeah. I don't know what would happen. Yeah, I may test it one day. One of the things I noticed, I'm not a Java programmer. I'm an Android one. So there's a lot of things about Java that I just don't know about. Right? And then I learn them as I do. So sometimes you have to figure out, well, you do need to know Java and the nuances in Java, right? And then you can do Android programming. So things like she mentioned about unsubscribing, yeah, you got to be aware of that. You got to be aware of garbage collection, all that kind of stuff. Otherwise, it'll probably bite you later on. Okay, just in summary, you know what an activity is, right? An activity is basically your XML file and your Java code kind of merged together. Visual Studio, they do it the same way, but you're not really aware of it because they do it behind the scenes. The layout is what you see on the screen, is your presentation. You can put any kind of layout, any kind of complicated layout that you want. Be aware of if you have too many layouts, too many controls, and if you're doing animation, you will see a performance. Okay. Most of the time you don't. If you're just showing information, fields, you're not going to see any performance. But if you're doing some kind of animation, color, moving bitmaps, if you have too many layouts, you will see a performance.
In the case of the layouts, would it be better to use the layouts with native C++ code and just I mean, if you have those types of layouts where you agree it's more of moving pictures, moving graphics, and then just have the rest being regular Android code, or?
I've seen graphics done in Java. That's pretty good. I do know that there are people who do it in C++, for speed. I don't know. If you want speed, then obviously you probably use C++. It's probably a little bit better.
Okay.
But, yeah, I just don't know. I don't do that many graphics programming. I do a lot of business applications.
I noticed a lot of this, the content you presented, I mean, it's basic, right? Is there any type of patterns or design patterns that you're using? Like, a lot of this looks like adaptive presenter with the way it's tied to the activity specifically, but like a lot of the stuff that in like the PDF folder in Windows Phone and Word, there's a lot of model view model. Is there like looking online for some stuff, but have you used that at all with Java, with Android, or?
See, that's a very interesting question because, like when I do Xamarin, Xamarin is based on .NET and it has the model view model paradigm that you follow, right? In terms of Android, most people don't follow that kind of paradigm.
Because it looks like it's very hard to unit test this code specifically.
It's a different. It's different.
Okay.
It's different. Like in Objective-C, when you do iOS, right? They have the model view controller, right?
Right.
Which I think is kind of a joke because the model view is in the same file, right? It's the same controller. To me, it's not separated, right? But they call it that. Okay. In Android, you could do it, but a lot of the applications that I've seen are like just singleton, right? So every activity is like its own, right?
Okay.
You may have hooks into a database, you pass values from one activity to another, and then from that you kind of load up the screens.
Okay.
Not too many applications have I seen follow that type of pattern. Not too many.
Because it's really hard to separate. Like, where do you put your business objects, like, or your domain objects?
That's a very good question.
Like when you put your project structure out, like, I mean, you probably have a customer, would want to put the attributes, the forms, stuff that would be. I just haven't seen a lot of data binding type of thing in Android.
Now, when you do Xamarin,
You can do that.
okay, with Xamarin, which is based on .NET, it lends itself to it because in Xamarin, what you have is you actually have like 3 different projects. Okay, you have your iOS project, your Android project, and then you have another project that's kind of platform independent. You put your business logic in that one because your business logic is going to be hopefully the same for Android and iOS. So you have this shared project in between, and then your GUI is in the Android and in the iOS.
I'm just kind of wondering because I mean, corporate applications should probably like employ some type of design architecture.
And you can do it with classes.
Yeah, that's what my guess is. I saw there was a NVVM project on GitHub that was for Android.
Yeah. I've seen some of
it
them.
seems like my point is I don't think Google is encouraging a specific
They're not.
design structure.
And you won't even find it in any of those documentations.
No.
First time I found it was in iOS.
Because they preach that view in their Angular JS, like Angular and stuff. So it's separating views and separating it.
Oh, one more thing. If you go for a job interview for Android, I tell you, they almost always ask you some of these questions. And one of the questions that they ask you is the life cycle. Okay, so if you go for an Android job, right, memorize the life cycle, because they will ask you that. And most of them don't even know what it means, but they'll ask you that. It's just funny. It just think you have a question?
Yeah. Deployment. You have the program. How do you deploy?
Okay. Yeah, that's okay. So deployment is actually publishing it up to Google Play. Okay. The only issue that you really have to do, and again, it's a bunch of GUI options, is you have to sign your application. So you go through this process of signing your application, and what it does is it takes a key of your machine, right? You put in your name and address, which can be anything, right? You create this signed version, and then you upload your application to Google Play. And that's really all it is. It's not anything like iOS or anything like that. There's no certification or anything. You sign your application, you upload it, and basically in a day or two it's up on Google Play.
That was my question, if there's like a certification app that you run your app through.
It's much different than iOS. iOS, most applications may get rejected 1 or 2 times. In Google, your application almost never gets rejected.
Or what would be the case where it gets rejected?
I don't know. If it has some kind of virus in it, they do check for some viruses or something. But I've never heard of an application being rejected on Google Play.
If you don't follow their guidelines, it probably will be rejected.
For
Yeah.
Google?
Yeah. Really?
I mean, you can put an application that just has like, you know, a button and something and no
I mean,
colors.
objectionable activity, you know.
Yeah, you won't get good ratings, but Google doesn't have a review process.
How do we push our application to a physical device? Do we need to use EDB, or is there a way of pushing it?
Okay, so when you connect your phone to your computer, anytime you compile and execute it, it'll get pushed on your phone automatically. Okay, so if you just want to put it on somebody's phone, if you can get access to it, just get the phone to it.
Sorry to interrupt. All right, so I'm gonna pass out tickets. So the ticket that I passed out is both halves. So just tear it apart and then give the other half to Mike.
Yeah. If you're not comfortable with getting a call from Robert Half, don't fill it out. Don't do the raffle, because they did spend like $575 on food and prizes. So it's kind of like part of that is that they can give you a call. But when they do, just say thank you very much for the food or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, Robert. They actually spend a lot. I mean, you can believe how much Portillo's charged for this. So they spend like Mike said, almost $600 on just food and drink today, and then prizes. So if you're comfortable giving them information, and you want to contact you, then fill it out, and then give the other half. So Mike said, so I'm gonna go around and give you guys both halves, and then Mike's gonna go around and grab the other half that does not have the information on it. So.
Somebody had a question, I forgot.
So you're saying Studio does detect your phone and then you can just...
Okay, right. So you can actually connect the phone and just compile it. You can use stuff like, I forgot what's the name of the... There's services out there that will actually push it to your device. There's a couple of them. Apple just picked up one.
Yeah, would that be like a debugging? Would it be in debugging mode? So as you're using it on the tablet, you're actually debugging it on the desktop?
No, you wouldn't be able to do that. It'll be basically a release version. You can put code in there that spits out to something like to a database.
You can use ADB, right, to list out.
Yeah, I think you have to do the ADB toggle in order to do what he's talking about. You know, like a toggle app to turn on the debugging mode.
Right. The other thing you can do, and this is very, very common, I know this works for Gmail. If I send you a APK and you have a Gmail account, if you open that APK with your Gmail, it'll install. As long as that person has installed from all other sources. Okay? So if you just want to email it to somebody, you can. I do that a lot. And then there's services, I forget what they're called.
So, did everybody get one? Everybody got one?
Right. So there's services that you can call so that you can upload an APK, and then you can decide who you want to push it to, and they'll download it automatically. Right. I forget offhand what it's called. Yeah, I forget, but there's a couple services out there that does that. Okay. The last thing I want to kind of mention is the whole idea of SQL and NoSQL databases. Okay, which is very interesting because most of our data are SQL databases, right? They're relational, that you can store your data in. Okay, but most of the applications that we have on Android don't need the relational model. So a lot of databases, a lot of applications use a NoSQL database. And NoSQL database is basically a fancy way of putting in a bunch of data that's identified by a key. And then you get back basically a big blob of data in a JSON response. And then what you do is you use the name value kind of paradigm. You say, is there a value for a name or address? And if it is, what is that value? There's not a relationship model. So you can't say, how many sales do I have with my this quarter? You can't easily do a relational model. But if you just want to store name, addresses, scores, some other data, a NoSQL database is pretty fast just doing that. Just retrieving data, a NoSQL database is very fast. You don't necessarily have the ability to do relational queries. A couple of them out. Amazon is one. Azure has a couple, I think. And there's services based on those guys that you can use too. So again, a NoSQL database is probably just as good as anything else. To me, it's even simpler. Okay. Any other questions?
Which one? Oh.
Like the NoSQL databases?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Which ones are being used typically for the NoSQL databases?
So MongoDB is probably the most popular one. Okay. I use a service called Parse, which is Parse, P-A-R-S-E, which is based on Amazon, and it works on multiple platforms. The reason I like it is because they give you some pseudo SQL relational queries. It's not quite, but it's almost. So you can say, fetch me all the data that's within this time span. Or fetch me, or you can do some simple relationships. So you can say, this table has a pointer to this table. And so when it retrieves data, it retrieves this data and the sub-data inside of it. So again, you know, look at some of those. They're pretty inexpensive and they're pretty quick.
You said in the beginning some people use SQLite. Is that big on performance? I mean, it's pretty lightweight. Not very many people use that.
It has some limitations as far as how much data you can use, right? Because again, it's a file, and how much space do you have on your device? Okay, but other than that, there's not a whole performance issue because it's a single user, right? It's okay for some things. It's okay. I've used it many times. You do iOS, right?
No, I
No.
don't think it's.
Okay, but there's a SQLite on iOS. Say that thing. I mean, Windows.
Yeah, on Windows also it's there. It is used even in Windows mobile applications.
Windows mobile applications. I was pretty surprised on how popular SQLite is. Right, it's pretty popular. It's been around for a while. I actually did applications some years ago in Windows using SQLite.
It's used in HTML5.
Do I use it?
No, it's used in HTML5.
Oh, it's used in HTML5. Okay. Another question I get a lot is how does programming natively differs from that of HTML5? Okay, because a lot of people would do HTML5, and you get your cross-platform type of applications. Okay, personally, I don't like them. I don't like HTML5. I did a couple projects of it, and none of those projects has been successful. My reason is this. People like to have native applications, and they like the look and feel performances of a native application. HTML5 just doesn't give it to you, in my opinion. Okay? But if you need to, I mean, if you pay me, I'll do it. I've had applications that have been simple enough in which I've used HTML5. What makes it kind of unique is that in Android and iOS and Windows, basically all you do is bring up a web page and then you point to an HTML5 file and it takes over. It's going to be generic. It's not going to have any Windows controls, any Android controls or iOS controls. But if your application is simple enough where you just want to take in some input, spit out an email, take a picture, do some simple things, HTML5 will do it. But if you want to get into an application that interacts with the controls and people like to use, HTML5 won't do it.